And welcome back, everyone. Today was the final match of the World Cup qualification match from Austria. If some of you have followed what's been happening, yesterday I recorded the game number 1 recap, and today was game number 2. And as you can already read from the title, the match is over and I was able to secure the ticket for the World Cup, which I'm very happy about. I think that the match with Dominik now went very smoothly. Of course, in the blitz section, which was streamed on my channel as well, anything could have happened, and there was definitely some luck involved as well that I could advance to the next round because I faced off Valentin Dragnev there in the playoff, and I was only it was super close that I was able to advance. But yeah, now in the final, I played against Dominik Horvath. Yesterday, I won my game with the black pieces, and therefore today it has brought me into a must-draw situation. But more importantly, it has given Dominik sort of a must-win situation with the black pieces, which is of course very difficult. And I think I was able to sort of restrain all of his counterplay quite well in today's game. But let's have a look at what happened. So I had the white pieces, and I went for the move knight f3, staying very solid. And it was quite difficult for me to sort of guess where he would be going. Let me just rearrange the camera a little bit. I think it would be better like that. Perfect. Yeah, it was difficult for me to kind of guess where he was going. Recently, he played a lot of the Grünfeld. So I was thinking also of going d4. And maybe he would have gone for the Grünfeld actually, which would have surprised me a little bit because there are quite a few forcing lines in Grünfeld where it's sort of possible to steer the game towards a draw. But I thought that he might prepare something else against d4 as well, maybe some King's Indian. So I wanted to stick with my repertoire basically and just go for knight f3. He went for knight f6, g3, and anyway he goes for g6. So I was also here kind of expecting him to go into some type of King's Indian structure with d6. But as we saw, as we can see, he actually went for d5, which was a little bit of an interesting move order, I might say, because usually black would start with short castle, and now I would have gone c4, not the move d4, which I think in this move order I recommend this move in my one knight f3 chess-based repertoire, because there I recommend this line with rook e1 here. That was the whole point. But for today's game, I was actually planning to play another system against the King's Indian, which is this one, and then to go for d3, followed by rook b1, b4, b5 quite often, which is kind of a reversed closed Sicilian actually with just a tempo up for white. So I think that this one is quite nice overall, and it's not really what black wants in the King's Indian, I would say, in general. But he started with the move d5, and now I was kind of in a... I was thinking a little bit, because obviously I prepared this symmetrical Grünfeld, even though I thought it would be somewhat of a strange choice in a must-win situation, but he did come up with one idea which is more ambitious, and I fortunately also prepared for that one. I was also thinking about c4 here, when now if he would go for c6, now he cannot transpose to the line he actually played in the game. And here I would be able to take, and this line is at least very, very drawish, so I would be happy there. Being in this type of must-draw situation, but I thought that he could go for d takes c4, and it might have also been what he was planning to do in the game. And here I was sort of familiar with knight a3, c5, that this is just completely playable for black, this type of position. And instead queen a4 is probably the best, and I thought that he might go for something like this, knight d7. Now white doesn't have to take right away, but he can, and black can develop with knight b6, knight c6, and e5. It's probably a bit more pleasant for white, but I wanted to keep it a bit more under control. And also I did prepare more for this line with d4. It was just kind of an extra option which he gave me with this move order, I would say. Anyway, this happened in the game, so he went for castle c4, and now he took dc4 to at least get some imbalance. Instead, after c6, there are quite a few lines for white which are very, very drawish. Queen b3, queen a4, or of course the very symmetrical line like this. And this is just very difficult for black to win. So he went for d takes c4. Now knight a3 is what I played. Still, we're following kind of main territory here. And here black has a couple of different moves, but Dominik played one very interesting line, which he already played a couple of times. Also one game against me, actually, in the Austrian, I think, Rapid Championship I think it was like 2 years back, must have been 2023. And in that game, he actually beat me. So that's why I thought that he could repeat that line. And yeah, it was kind of a good guess, I would say. Apart from a5, black has two other main moves, I would say. The one kind of old move is c3, which is not so popular anymore. The point is that black wants to provoke white to take, and now to get this type of Grunfeld structure, I think the main line continues something like c5, and white starts with rook e1 or bishop e2, I'm not sure. Maybe rook e1, knight c6, and now bishop b2. And there is one nice trick here. So first of all, the idea is to prepare e4. And if black goes for bishop f5, which has been played a couple of times, then white actually has this move d5. I recommend this in my chess-based course as well for white. And this already is a huge advantage. The point is that black cannot take comfortably on d5 because there's going to be a double attack after e4. And if black doesn't take, but instead goes for something like knight a5, just to demonstrate, then white will build this huge center and black is lacking any counterplay in the center. And white will at some point get an e4 with a huge space advantage and just a very good position. But of course, black has different options here. Like instead of bishop f5, I think queen b6 was kind of what they've been doing. Also bishop b6, I believe, was one move. So there are some ideas here. The most solid continuation is to go c5, but of course it was not in his interest to go into that. There are some lines here. D takes c5 is one move. There's also knight takes c4 when I think this is somehow how it goes. Bishop e6, is it knight e5? There are many draws here. I think it's knight e5, but I'm not. Yeah, knight fe5 is probably the main move as it indicates here. I'm just trying to look where it was. Yeah, there was this line, but I was actually thinking about something else. I think it was d takes c5, which I wanted to point out. And now c3, knight b5, this is how it goes. And I think, is it knight a6? I'm completely out now. Knight a6, knight c3, I think this is what I wanted to say. Bishop e3 and now knight e4. This is how many games end here, basically, in this type of endgame, which is yeah, white is playing for two results, but it's basically just a draw. So of course he didn't want to go for that, being in a must-win situation. So instead, after I was talking a lot about all of these variations, now let's continue with the game. The move a5, which he played, which is quite an interesting line. The point is that he just wants to gain space on the queen side, put this pawn to a4, and it's going to clamp down the queen side a little bit for white. Before we start with that one, I should also point out this line, which is knight c6, knight takes c4, now bishop e6, which is also quite possible. And here there is a similar idea. If white goes b3, black can go a5 and try to undermine the queen side with a4 to come. That's another possibility for black. And what he played in the game is sort of similar, but he's kind of keeping his knight especially more flexible. And in some cases, black can still go for c6 and not knight c6. So these are kind of the main ideas. So now after a4, white has a couple of different moves. I prepared this a little bit in the morning, and I went for the move which I also recommend in my chess-based course, which is the move bishop f4, which I thought is kind of the most harmonious one. You just want to bring the rook to c1. There are also other moves, like knight fe5 is one option, which was another game by Dominik against another Austrian grandmaster, Andreas Diermeier. And here Dominik played c6, e4, knight fd7. Dominik later on went on to lose that game, but when I looked at this, I wasn't entirely sure in the morning, because black also does have considerable counterplay against white's center, and I'm not really fully coordinated yet. So, and also this pawn on a4 is very useful for black in general, because he just gained a lot of space. And yeah, I didn't want to go for that one. So instead I went for bishop f4, which seemed quite solid. Bishop e6 and now rook c1. So this is the whole idea, just trying to get the rook to the half-open c file and protecting the knight on c4. And here he sort of surprised me with this move knight h5, which he was actually still prepared with that one, but I just couldn't remember. If I checked it, I don't think I did, but yeah, I was sort of on my own from here. I only remembered the line which is also indicated by the computer, knight c6, and here I was looking at knight g5 in the morning. And the point is that now black has to do something. The bishop cannot really move. Like if it goes back, then white will get d5 with just a huge position. So instead, black probably needs to go for this forcing line knight takes d4 and now bishop e5. I was looking at this in the morning after some exchanges. Black has to trade queens, otherwise I can even keep queens on the board. I think queen c2 was one idea here. And yeah, this position, of course, I would be very happy with in a situation like this, because there's not really any way that white can lose this. Black probably makes a draw, but yeah, of course, it's pleasant for white, especially in my situation. But Dominik went for knight h5, which he told me that he was still prepared with. And it was quite an interesting idea. And here I was thinking for, yeah, quite a long time. I would say like 20 minutes maybe. And then I managed to find this move bishop e3, which is still the best. And yeah, Dominik told me that he was a bit upset that I found it, because it's not such an obvious move, I would say, because the bishop does look a little bit clumsy on e3, and white just has many options to consider. So that was kind of the main thing here, which made it so difficult for me, because there are many moves which I can play here. Another idea, first of all, bishop e5 also looks quite natural. And here I was not sure about, firstly, f6, which is probably the best. Also about bishop h6, which is actually not so great. Here, after e3, f6, I completely missed this idea with d5. Also, bishop f4 is actually quite good, when I kind of forgot that this knight on h5 will be hanging after g5 in some variations. But d5 was very strong here, with a nice point that after bishop d5 I can take on c7, and I'm completely winning. And if bishop f7, now g4, this is another point here, and I have a large advantage, because after some exchanges, black is going to have a lot of trouble with the light squares and also with his pawn structure in general. So yeah, but after bishop e5, he could go for f6, which he also would have done. And now if I go back, which I don't think is the best, at least he can take the bishop here in some cases. He might also have some ideas with b5 sometimes. And I think that the computer indicated d5 was one move here, which I even thought about in the game a little bit, but I just could not really make it work. I think I thought about bishop f7, then I have to go back with the bishop, I thought, and then he just takes on d5. Maybe I missed something better here. Maybe there is something, but I just couldn't see it. Maybe I can go for g4 here. Maybe that's another option, but it just felt a little bit too unclear, especially in the situation I was in. Another point was bishop g5, which I also considered, with the idea that now if he goes h6, I thought I have a better version after bishop e3, because I'm going to hit the pawn on h6 with the tempo. But after knight c6 here, I wasn't entirely sure. Knight fe5 turns out to be quite strong. And after knight takes e5, now d takes e5, I didn't really understand that so much. I only saw that I cannot recapture comfortably with the knight, because then f6 is going to pick up the piece most likely. So that's why I sort of rejected bishop g5, but it's also not a bad move. I think that I also missed that after bishop d5, with the idea of knight c6, then there is the very strong move e4, which I didn't see at all. The point is after bishop e4, there's rook e1, and he has troubles keeping everything together, since the bishop is hanging and e7 is going to be hanging in many different variations as well. So yeah, bishop g5 I was considering, bishop e5, bishop d2 I didn't consider so much. There was one predecessor here when black played b5, and yeah, here after knight c e5, bishop takes a2, bishop b4 is playable for white. White has enough compensation, but again, not really the type of position I would like in my situation, because it's just a little bit unbalanced. I'm also happy that I didn't go for queen d2, which I actually thought about a little bit too long, just trying to keep everything harmonious, but I just rejected it, that after he takes, he gets the bishop pair and has just pretty harmonious play. I thought this could be one way to play for me, but now he's already threatening b5 and taking on a2. So yeah, I rejected it, and for good reason. Actually, black might be slightly better even here already. So after some thought, I went back bishop e3, which has the upside that the pawn on d4 is also still protected. And I'm sort of just arguing that the knight is also misplaced on h5. And if he goes back to f6, of course, I could make some reasonable moves, but in my situation, I could also just go for bishop f4 and offer a repetition of moves. So Dominik went bishop d5, still being prepared, queen d2, once again the best move, and now after knight c6, I was thinking for quite a long time, but this was actually a time really, really well spent, I believe. I then went for the move bishop h6, where I needed to do some calculation because the pawn on d4 is often hanging, but it does turn out to be to work for me in the very end. The most natural move, I would say, is rook f to d1, when in the game I was actually unsure about rook e8, which is probably not that great, but I was just not sure here after bishop h6, bishop h8, that the pawn on d4 is still hanging. Sometimes it's probably not a good way at all for black to be playing, but I wanted a more simplified position. It turns out that Dominik actually prepared rook fd1 and now the move knight f6, with the point that if I go bishop h6 now, there's knight a5, which I didn't see at all in the game. And after knight takes a5, now bishop takes h6, queen h6 and rook a5, when knight g5 does not really work just yet, because black can just take and go queen d5, and I would have to go back with the knight. And still h7 is also protected. And in the meanwhile, my queen side is a little bit awkward. The pawn on a2 is hanging, so this does look quite comfortable for black. White is still okay, but black has a lot of counterplay here. So instead, the best move was knight fe5. I think I was even talking about that with Dominik briefly. And this is how the computer line continues. Queen d5 check, f3, and rook fd8, when, white is maybe objectively slightly better, but black certainly has counterplay, especially against the d4 pawn. So I'm very happy with the move I played in the game, bishop h6, because strategically speaking, it would be very nice to just exchange those two bishops, because my bishop is just a little bit awkward on e3, and the bishop on g7 is very, very active, so it would be nice to exchange that one. And it turns out that he has to go for the forcing line which he played in the game. Otherwise, he would be quite significantly worse, honestly. There was one other nice point which I wanted to show. It was a little bit before. Here, after move c6, which I also briefly considered. Before pointing that out, we should also say that b5, I thought is just a bit too early. I thought I have many moves like knight e5, also knight a3, and he just has many weak squares. He cannot really take on a2 here, because I can at least take on b5. Maybe there's even something better. So that doesn't really work. Instead, I was thinking about c6 a little bit, and here I think I intended knight g5, with the point that the bishop now has to move to a worse square, because the move bishop d5, which you would usually like to make here, he cannot take with the queen, at least because I have knight b6. And after cd5, now I can argue that some of the squares are weak. Maybe I can go knight e5, because f6 runs into knight e6, and he has some weaknesses on the queen side here at least. But the move which I wanted to point out, which the computer says is pretty nice, which is the move knight b6. I don't think I would have played this in that game, or in any game, to be quite frank. After queen b6, the point is d5, and the computer says that this position is huge for white, which is not obvious at all, because this pawn is advancing quite rapidly, especially with the help of the bishop on g7. Computer gave something like +1 here, but black has 2 pawns up, so very, very difficult to understand. I guess that white's key strategy is on the light squares. Like, you could think about some knight g5, bishop h3, bishop e6. That could be one idea, but very difficult to understand that one. I would probably have gone for knight g5 here. Anyway, Dominik went bishop d5, and this was the position we are with, which happened in the game, bishop h6. And now he went for the forcing line, bishop takes f3. I'm not sure what else he could do here, because otherwise I'm just going to take on g7. If he takes on h6, it's also not making things any better. One important line which I saw here was that, well, whenever he takes on f3 and then takes on d4, then I can just capture on h5, and maybe I'm even winning already with a move like rook d1. That could be one idea, but the minimum I have is just to capture on h5, always protecting the pawn on e2, and his king is weak. I have the better pawn structure, so this would be just pretty bad for black. But instead, the line I was looking at was knight takes d4, and knight takes d4, bishop takes g2. And here after king g2, I thought I wouldn't have enough compensation, because everything is covered. But instead, I was looking at rook fd1, bishop d5, and here I'm quite happy that I was able to calculate the best move. I don't think it was the only winning move, but the clearest, which is the move knight f3. I was also looking at knight e3 in the beginning, but here it wasn't so obvious what is my threat. I do have some knight f5 ideas, but I wasn't so sure if he goes c6, how I'm going to continue. But instead, knight f3 is very nice, because he actually doesn't have any way to stop e4, which just picks up the piece. If knight f6, then I can go knight g5, and once again I have this idea with e4. And if he steps away with the queen now, let's say to e8, then I can capture on d5, and it's going to be checkmate on h7. So I'm quite happy that I was able to calculate this pretty long line, I would say. So instead he took on f3, bishop takes f3, and now queen takes d4. Once again, if he takes on h6, it's this type of position, which is just pretty bad for black. So he captured on d4, and yeah, I was looking at that when I played bishop h6, but I thought it's going to lead to an endgame where I'm not really running any risk of losing, which is probably also the case. I then captured on g7. The other option was to take on c6, and after queen d2, now bishop takes d2, and to play this type of position. I also thought it would be possible, but black is at least one pawn up for the moment. I thought it should be a draw with moves like bishop b4, for example, or rook c2 followed by rook c1, or even bishop c3, but it's probably not the cleanest. In the game, I played bishop g7. Now he took on d2. Instead, if he takes on g7 with the queen, trying to keep queens on the board, I thought it's risking quite a lot, because now my queen is infiltrating, and I'm at least picking up one pawn, maybe, well, probably more than that even, because all of the pawns are hanging. So instead he captured on d2, knight d2, knight g7, take on c6, everything, knight e6, and I thought that we're gonna shake hands here pretty soon, but I have to give it to my opponent that he actually, he tried everything in his power to win this game, and at some moment I was actually feeling quite a lot under quite some pressure. Here I played the move e3, which I think is very natural, just stopping knight d4. The computer says that knight c4 is a tad bit better, not weakening some squares here. The point is that after knight d4 I can just take on c7, and now my rook is quite active on the 7th rank. Would be probably slightly better there. And instead, after a move like rook fd8, which I was also considering, now he just gives the cool move rook b1 with the idea to just bring the king to e1. And after that, I'm not sure how white is going to make progress. Maybe at some point to bring the rook to the c file, but yeah, this is what the computer was giving. Not really obvious during a game. So I played e3 just to cover the d4 square, but of course it does weaken some squares on the king side, which Dominik then was able to use quite nicely. He played rook fd8. Now I went for rook c2, again being very, very safe. Knight c4 is also possible, maybe a bit more active, but I thought my rook on c6, it looks active, but it's also kind of trapped, I would say. I mean, it's not going to get trapped, but it just doesn't have any squares available. And I wanted to have the rook on c2 also that it's protecting the b2 pawn. Here he went for the move g5, which is quite a typical idea, just gaining space on the king side. Instead, I was also looking at ideas like knight c5, trying to get the knight to d3. But after rook c5, I can even take that one. I don't have to, but also something like this should just end in a draw. For example, rook b1, just a lot of material is going to disappear here. Instead, he could have tried a3 maybe. Once again, I have many different choices. I can take on a3, which maybe black has achieved something here because the pawn on a2 could be weak, but also this should be quite a simple draw. After the move b3, now he could argue that knight c5 could be a better version, because now I cannot capture comfortably because a2 is very weak. Now I would be in quite some trouble, I believe. But instead, I don't have to take here. I could go for knight c4. But now at least there's some unbalance. He can try to get the knight to b4 and argue that something is happening. But of course, the pawn on a3 is now a weakness as well. I'm not sure what I would have done after a3. I guess I can also just keep it like this and play a move like rook c1. So of course it's a draw, but it would have been another approach. But he played g5. Now I went for h3, just stopping g4 for the moment. And now after h5, I went rook fc1. Here I was spending just way too much time, which put me under some pressure later on. Just keep in mind that we didn't have any additional time after move 40. That's kind of an important detail. So at some moment I was down on a few minutes and didn't get any additional time apart from the 30 seconds increment. So I was a bit worried about that fact after some time. Instead of rook fc1, I think the g4 would have been a bit cleaner, just trying to avoid black from gaining any space. My first instinct was even to go g4 right away. I also thought that he might try h5 here, when after h3 I could transpose, but I guess that I can just take this pawn and it's not so easy to regain it. I was just very, very careful at this stage, which allowed my opponent to gain some space then. So I think that g4 might have been the cleanest at this moment. Also here g4, I was seeing some ghosts here after king g7. I thought that the rook is going to infiltrate on h4. I was even looking at some lines like this, but I think that I just have king f3 here. I don't know what I exactly missed in the game here, and it's not clear how he's actually having any threats here. And in the meanwhile, I can also try going after some pawns on the queen side. So I think this would have been a better choice. I'm not sure what he would have tried, probably something along those lines, but I can keep everything protected here, it seems. Instead, I went rook c1, now king g7. Again, I guess I can go for g4, but instead I went for knight e4. I was just trying to exchange everything with knight c5 coming on the next move. He played rook a b8. Now I played the move b3, which again is trying to just force a draw, and not a bad decision as in itself, but a3 might be a bit more ambitious at least, and might have been a move which I played in a game where I don't necessarily have to go for a draw, or even some other moves like g4 before that. And here the point with the a3 is that I'm just preparing knight c5 at some moment. For example, here I could go for this, and then after he takes this and takes on b2, now a2 is not hanging, so I guess that now I could just go after the g4 pawn, and it just should be a draw. I could also play a move like king g2 just to keep the pressure here, would also be one possibility. a3, kind of a smart move. But instead I played b3 with the point that if he takes, which he did, and if he would take again, then I can just play knight c5, and after he takes, I'm gonna win either c7 or g5, and it would be just a very simple draw. So instead Dominik tried to move g4, keeping some pieces on the board. And now I played h4 with the point that I want to keep the g5 square covered at all costs. I'm not sure if there's anything simpler, maybe there is, but just to demonstrate, if I would take here and now, like in the game, play the move knight c5, I thought that he has some threats at least with knight f3 to come. Should also be a very simple draw, but I didn't want to allow the knight to enter an f3. So that was my plan on playing h4, and also I thought that the pawn on h5 could be a weakness in some cases. Here he played the move rook d5. After the game he told me that rook b5 might have been a bit smarter, at least practically speaking, because now after knight c5, what I also played in the game, after knight f8, what he also played in the game, now knight a6, would not happen with the tempo, at least on the rook on b8. But well, there are many ways to a draw. Like rook c6 is quite a smart move, which I could have also played in the game, with the point that I'm kind of just preparing the move knight c5. Like if black now takes on b3, I once again have knight c5 with a straight, with a very simple draw. And if he makes a move like, I don't know, rook b4 here, then I can go knight c5, and now I'm hitting the knight on e6. And if he retreats now I can just take on c7 right away. So that's quite a nice idea, this move rook c6. But he played rook d5. Again, I could go for the move rook c6, which is maybe a simpler draw, but instead I went knight c5. Again, if he captures on c5, it's a very simple draw, so he kept some pieces on the board, knight f8. Now the move knight a6, which is just a little bit too careful, I would say. Rook c3 looks a bit more natural, just trying to prepare knight a6. I just wanted to get rid of all of the pawns, but after rook d8, well, I can do anything like king f1, king e2, and or just moving the knight and then try to take on c7, so that might be a bit more natural. But instead I played knight a6. There's nothing objectively wrong with that, but also this position is quite a simple draw, but black has more space on the king side, and at some moment at least I was a little bit worried, especially with low time on the clock. Here I played rook c5, once again trying to aim for exchanges. Another thing is the knight on c7, which is, at least for the moment, not taking part in the game. And black has the plan to bring the knight to e5 or to e4, and then to try to use the squares on the king side for him to get some threats. I guess if I play a move like knight a6, just bring the knight back to c5, I'm also in no danger at all to lose. But, well, in a position like this, you start to see some ghosts with the knight appearing on f3. Well, there's nothing happening. I can maybe just go king g2. I don't see what's the problem there. Maybe I'm missing something already, because it was indicated to be a red move. But, this should also be kind of a simple draw, but I wanted to, just exchange everything as soon as possible. Here he played the move rook b1, which, was a little bit shocking to me. I didn't see that at all. But fortunately, it's not blundering anything. I was mostly looking at rook c5, rook b1 check, king g2, and now some ideas to bring the knight to e5 and then to f3. But I thought I have enough counterplay. Like if he plays knight g6 here, I can capture on h5, and knight e5 is not possible just yet because the square is covered. And if he tries to prepare with f6, I thought I have well, some ideas, for example, to bring the knight to d4, in the worst case to cover the f3 square, but there might even be some other ideas already. Black could also be in some danger here if he's not careful. Apart from that, I also was looking at king h6. Here I thought after knight d5, I'm in time with my counterplay, knight g6, now knight f4, forcing the exchange of knights, and it would just be a simple draw. So he played rook b1, I captured and played knight b5, knight to d7, knight to d4. Yeah, I guess it looks quite boring for you guys, but during the game with like 3-4 minutes on the clock and just this whole pressure that so much is at stake, I was feeling a little bit nervous, to say the very least. e5, knight e2. Once again, I guess knight f5 is a little bit more active, but yeah, after king f6 or king g6, I wasn't sure if I want to play e4. It is quite a committal move, and the pawn could be weak in some cases, but probably I'm in time to get enough counterplay. But I played it very careful with knight e2, rook c2, king f1, now king g6. And well, this position, yeah, if you imagine the knight coming to e4 or even the king running to f3, then something could happen. But fortunately, I was careful enough here to save the draw quite easily. I played rook c1, rook b2, and rook c6, which I think is the cleanest, just trying to activate the rook. And wherever black goes, I just have enough activity. He played the move king g7. We were also talking about king f5 here. I was planning to play knight c3, already threatening mate in 1 with e4. And after knight f6, I can simply wait, and black doesn't have anything to do as well. But I thought I can just force the draw with e4. Now if the king goes back, I'm winning the piece with knight d5. And if he takes here rook f6, and it's quite a simple draw, I can either take the pawn on f7, or if he goes back, now just wait around, or at some moment I can also go after the h5 pawn. But I guess I would just make a move like king e2 here, because there's no real way for black to make any progress. Yeah, apart from that, knight f6 was also another move here. After knight c3, there was this nice trick with knight d5. Again, probably not the only way to draw here, but the simplest. After rook c6, knight e7, I'm gaining back the rook, and it's a simple draw. So he played king g7, now knight c3. He played knight to f6, and now rook c5, just going after the pawn on e5. If he plays rook c2 here, trying to pin me, I'm not sure what I would have done. Maybe I think rook c7 was my plan. Once again, if he moves the knight to either b6 or f6, I have the move knight d5. That was my idea in the game. And again, I'm forcing some trades. So he played knight f6, rook c5, now rook b3. If he plays rook c2, I thought I again have the move knight e4. So he played rook b3, rook c4, just covering the e4 square. Now knight e8, yeah, I mean, it is a draw, but maybe this was not the best try. He can maybe try with something like king g6, but of course nothing is happening. I can just go back to c6. Knight e8, knight e4, and he played f5, but here I played the move rook c8, which is very accurate. And around here it was already kind of turning around, as we'll see. Maybe he was only thinking about knight g5 when I guess it's also a simple draw, because, well, I just have so much counterplay now with rook c7 or rook c6. I'm not sure what he was planning here either. But I played rook c8, forcing the king to protect the knight. If he takes here, it's probably also draw, but yeah, he already has to be a bit careful because the pawns are a bit weak. So he played king f7, knight g5 check, king e7, rook c5. And after king d6, he offered a draw, which I accepted, being on 3 minutes and yeah, qualifying to the World Cup with that draw. But yeah, in another game, I would have surely played it on. It's still a draw objectively, but after rook a5, which I intended also to play, then black has to be very careful now. The only move which is sort of a clear draw, also not entirely clear, is rook b7, which is also not so easy to understand. And after rook a6, now trying to keep the king active with king d5. And yeah, if I go after the pawn on h5, not sure what black would do. Maybe knight g7, trying to keep it covered, but maybe also trying to activate the knight like this. I don't know if black is in time here. Yeah, maybe he is, but yeah, it's already a little bit scary for black. But anyway, I accepted the draw here. Winning the match, it was enough for me, and I was quite happy with how the game went today as well. I think it was overall a quite good match from my part. I have to say that I was a little bit lucky in the first round. It doesn't happen quite often against such a strong opponent that, yeah, they lose with the white pieces so quickly. I did make quite a smart decision with the preparation yesterday, I believe. With this line, I played with black. And I was also quite lucky that exactly what I looked at in the morning actually came in the game. So of course luck is also involved. But overall, my quality of play in this match, I think, was quite good. Also today, I kept everything sort of confined and didn't allow him any counterplay, especially with this move bishop h6, which kind of forces a lot of trades. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this this recap. The match is over now. I'm quite happy that I don't have to play any rapid or blitz tiebreak tomorrow, because there, of course, anything could happen. So that means I'm going to the World Cup, which is being hosted by India, I think in New Delhi, if I'm informed correctly. I think it starts on the 31st of October. So it's my second World Cup experience, actually. I played in 2023 the first time, where I got knocked out in the first round against Dimitrios Mastrovasilis, Greek grandmaster. So this time, again, I'm probably playing some grandmaster close to 2600, most likely. So really excited for it. World Cup is one of my favorite tournaments to watch, but also to play, because the format is just very exciting. That, yeah, you can go home after 2 days, or you can go home after 1 month. That's sort of what happens in the World Cup. So really excited for it. I'm gonna try to take that tournament very seriously, trying to get some nice preparation for that one, because you have a lot of time to prepare. But anyway, I'm gonna keep you guys updated. So now that this is over, maybe I can talk about what's happening next. I'm gonna play the Austrian Rapid and Blitz Championship starting on Thursday. Until then, I hope that I can produce another video for you guys. Let me know what you guys would like to see. The opening video is still in progress, still working on the lines there. But if you have any ideas what you would like to see, definitely let me know in the comment section down below. Apart from that, thank you guys for watching. I appreciated all of your nice comments and good wishes for this match. Always appreciate it very much. So thank you guys, and I'm going to see you very soon.